coming up on Mental Health Matters with Marty. Hey, it's been a year since I launched my podcast, and it's time to celebrate. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Hey, it's me. I'm your boy. I'm your host. I'm sounding like Kirk Franklin. It's your nephew. It's your boy. It's your brother. It's your baby daddy. No, just kidding. It's Marty Sellers, and I am your mental health hygienist. And y'all, I am so excited that I am celebrating a year of my launch of my podcast, Mental Health Matters with Marty. And listen, I cannot be too excited about this. Listen, yes. Carlinda, I thank you so much for joining us on today. Thank you for being excited with me. But listen, invite some people in here. We got some great topics going on. I got some great friends and that are going to be joining us today. But I first have to acknowledge the team, the woman that helped me launch all of this, the one that really allowed me to be who I am. Oh, thank you so much. The one who allowed me to be who I am, who coached me, who guided me, who gave me the strength, who gave me even just all the know-how so I would not be who I am today in this thing called podcasting and podcasting world. I just knew I wanted to do podcasting, but I didn't know how to do it. Have you ever been that way in your life? And you know what? I just said, I'm going to be a podcast. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then our paths cross and the rest is history. So I'm going to relinquish my show today. Are you ready for that? And I'm a little bit of a control freak. Shh, that's our secret. Don't tell anyone. But come on now. Listen, but I'm so excited to have with me listen, John Henry Scott. So good. Hey, glad you're here. Vendone, what's up? V? But listen, I'm so excited to have none other than the dynamic storyteller herself. None other than Portia Scott of Portia Scott Media.
Hello, darling.
Hello.
Happy anniversary.
Hello, darling. How are you?
I am amazing, Marty. Happy anniversary to you, my friend. I am so excited. Listen, if you have ever created anything, especially a podcast, and you've been able to hold it up for a year, you deserve a celebration. So I am so
That's my
excited
number one
to
fan.
be here.
Thank you, Paula. Paula actually has a blue sticker now on her stuff that says top fan on her stuff.
Yeah, she does. I know.
Don't you love her? Listen,
come
on.
She got it. I was like, oh my God, look at that. Yes.
Listen, I'm so excited. Portia, thank you so much. Dante, how are you, man? Listen, hope you're doing well with that transition going to OSU. Yes, Paula says, hello, darling.
Oh, darling, it's
our anniversary. And listen, Portia, I was just in Atlanta with you.
Absolutely.
Yes. What's up, Zave? I appreciate you. Listen, thank you so much. But we were just celebrating our anniversary on your show, Wake Up
Absolutely.
Well.
Our 1 year anniversary.
One year anniversary. It has been just a monumental year. Even though 2020 was difficult for so many, it was a launching pad for us to get out there and just talk to people. And I cannot thank you enough for believing in the vision, for supporting me, and just helping me to get out there with confidence and just really tell me when things are great, tell me when things are bad. Say, you can really tweak this a little bit more. But I thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming in. This is great. So
Marty, you know what? Working with you was amazing. It was fabulous. And I said it in my post, but Marty was actually the first podcast that was launched under the Portia Scott Media brand.
That's
However, he has now moved over and he's doing his thing. And it was just such a blessing to be able to go through that and go on that journey with you. You already had your voice out there. People already knew who you were. You already knew what you wanted to do. So it's so very easy to be able to coach you and just give you how to, right? To go from idea to execution. You already had the mission in mind. And so It was super easy. And thank you so much for trusting me with your baby. So I appreciate that so much.
Definitely. But see, one of the things you coached me in is making sure I had the right equipment, knowing how to have the right lighting, the right microphone, and how to do all of that. And that's what's so important because, too many of us are putting products out there that are just wah wah wah.
Right,
And
right.
but you're there to coach me.
Oh,
Hey, thank you so much, Prince. I appreciate you.
and I have to
Definitely.
say, Daryl, with the equipment, I always say
Right.
he's the techie guy, right? And so I'm the storyteller,
Right.
and just the ability to move you along the trail from that idea to execution. What does that look like step by step? But Marty, I want to get into it because one of the
Okay.
things, when I think about podcasting, especially for me, as a storyteller, it was a way that I was able to take the listener. I like to say I take them on this audible tour guide,
Right.
whether or not it's a solo episode or interview, and you get to lead the listener on this journey. And because
Right.
most of the time it is audible, that you get to put in the stories how you want them to look at something, how to brighten up or dim
Right.
something down. And so, as we're thinking about this 1 year anniversary, I want you to tell me, when you think about podcasting and you think
hmm
about someone listening to your podcast, what is the thing that you hope that they walk away with?
One of the things I wanted to do in this podcasting world, and the reason why I wanted to launch the podcast was because I do mental health, and that is my passion. And I wanted people to find you be able to use this podcast as a safe space, almost like you and I are just talking right now. That I'm able to talk to the listener in a real and relevant way to let them know there is no shame in saying I'm not okay. There's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm struggling with my mental health and wellness right now. And that we have to, and I say it this way all the time, we have to stop the stinking thinking. And we have to no longer suffer in silence in the shadow of shame because too many of us are going through mental health trauma, going through mental health illnesses, going through mental health symptoms and symptomologies, and don't know where or how to even share that experience. And so I wanted to allow my podcast to be an example of sharing those times, allow the podcast to be a resource for how we can learn more about mental health and just to normalize mental health. We all are going to experience some sort of mental health at some time during our life. That's just normal. We all experience some sort of anxiety. We all experience some sort of depression. We all experience grief. We all experience loss. But I wanted to normalize that to say you don't have to suffer in silence, but it's okay to say I'm not okay and then not feel shame, especially for men, especially for
Mhm.
black men, where
Absolutely.
we oftentimes don't have the same, I'll say the capacity or
Mhm.
trust with each other or sharing our hurts without feeling judged. And I wanted a judge-free zone to be able to do that, especially as it pertains to mental health and mental wellness.
Absolutely. I saw this comment come up. It said, "Happy and blessed anniversary. You're a major blessing to the world."
Oh,
And
wow.
for you all that are
Thank you, Vanessa.
commenting, one, thank you, because I think, it's funny on live shows, you're able to see the comments. When you're
Right.
putting out a podcast, you don't always see those comments unless you have the reviews or something on Instagram. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so important that we do get your voice out, right?
Right.
Because now you know that you're impacting somebody, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's that one person. And Marty, when you think about the one person that you want to impact, because I like to think about impact in the number one, because if it's enough to touch one person, that'll help us
Right.
keep going, right? Um,
Right.
so if one person listens to the podcast, like, is that enough? And so when you think about that one person, who is that one person that, keeps you going, that you're thinking about, that kind of avatar or that patient that you've seen or someone you've seen in the grocery store that you're like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I want this to touch that one person.
When I think of that one person, I have this previous client, and I have permission to use his name, and he was Richard Love. And I say it in the past tense because he is one of my patients that took his own life to suicide. And I always say, what if Richard had just one more person to talk to? What if Richard had one more resource that he could listen to? And the very thing that his name was the very thing that he struggled in receiving love and knowing how to love himself. Richard was, I believe, 22 years old when he took a bus from Southern California to San Francisco to jump off of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's about a 10 to 12 hour bus ride. And it just impacted me in such a way that I said, I never want to see, and if whatever I can do to help prevent another young black male who lost his way, who was hurting so bad that the only way they thought they could stop the hurt was by ending their lives. There's too many of us like that who struggle with suicide ideations. There's too many of us like that who have PTSD. There's too many of us like that who have had vicarious trauma from George Floyd, from Ahmaud Arbery, from Breonna Taylor, from systemic racism. And we have all this built inside of us, that we have no viable means a lot of times, that we feel in the moment that we can get relief from it. So he is my guy that I speak to all the time, that I do therapy to all the time. Because if we can make one difference in his life, in someone else's life, we can begin to change our stinking thinking and begin to change the world.
I love that, Marty. I love that. And we can see that it's making a difference. When I'm on your show and people are just like, help me, or they have questions and you're answering questions and sending them to get help and to seek
Yeah.
help. And I think that you are normalizing mental health and therapy, counseling in the Black community. But I think in other communities, right? I think it's always funny because when we start off with going through the podcasting process, I always talk about, what is your avatar? What is that person look like? I want to know their
Right.
socioeconomic. I want to know,
Yes.
did they go to college? I want to know what their color is, what their religion
Yes.
is. I want to know, do they have kids? I literally
Right.
want you to write out this person that you're talking to. And so often what we find is we talk to that person, but the outliers that we would have never imagined. And you have people that listen and you're like, wow, I would have
Wow.
never known it would have
Right.
touched you. But if you had not been talking to that one person, if you had not showed up and you
Yes.
begin to show up, and as I like to say, wake up and show up. And
That's
you've
right.
been showing up. And so if there's one episode, your favorite episode, what would it be?
I think one of my favorite episodes is with my boys, my boys, Vindon, Steve Dolphin, and Brent. And we just talked about the struggles that we have, and we just had an honest conversation about fatherhood. And do you know, I had about 4 of my clients come to me and says, I was listening to that episode, and you made me feel better about myself as a father. And too often, even in that scenario, we as Black fathers, we as fathers of color, we talk through our hardship of having children outside of our marriages before that. We talked about the struggles that was, and then trying to merge blended families. We talked about our failures as fathers. We talked about our need for support as fathers. We talked about wanting to hurt our kids sometimes as fathers. But Steve Dolphin pulled me off the ledge. Brent Jones pulled me off the ledge. And that we had this village. I had my boys that I could talk to and go to and say, listen, if you don't come over here and do something with this jackleg wannabe Negro, I'm about to kick him out and I'm about to catch a case. And I was there. They were there to help me through that as well. And I think one of my second favorite episodes, if I could do 2, and my brother's on here today, is with that, my brother, because he's doing it, and he's been my model for that as well, because he's got way more episodes. He got double the episodes I've been doing, but he's so consistent. He has this passion for it. And I just love it. And that and I love it because my brother, we never are competitors, but we're always been, he's always been there to support me. He'd be like, Mark, I need this, Mark. I'm like, okay, whatever. And that's what I just love. And just having that, and to be able to have that, be able to be real with my own blood brother. And
Right.
that, because many families aren't even close today, but I know whatever I need, I got his back and he's got
Mhm.
mine. And so that was just a wonderful reminder. And just to free talk, I've been on his show, he's been on mine, and we just have a good time. We really do. And I
Oh,
think
I
the
love
older
that.
we get, the more much how much I realize we think alike. And it's
Right. Right.
I'm
It's
like,
so
wait a minute.
funny. Yes, when you're little, I don't know about what the age difference is, but when you're younger, it seems so like you're worlds apart. And then as you get older, you're like, wait a minute, it's not that, it's
Right.
not that bad.
Them sellers bid, that's my cousin. Yes,
I
yes.
love that. So, Marty, I want you to think about this because I think sometimes we look back on what we have done. And
Uh-huh.
I want us to look almost to the future and come
Mm-hmm.
back. And so you've been, and think about it, your podcast has now been number one in the world. You've touched millions and millions of lives.
Wow.
You've released podcasts under your media company.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that you set out to do, you did. You're telling
Mm-hmm.
these stories that are impacting and inspiring others. What is the one thing that you are proud of?
Ooh, you know, that's a good question. I had to think about that. Um, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is being a black man doing this thing called therapy and trying to make a difference. You know, it can be difficult as a black male therapist. We only make up 1% of this thing called therapy, and so many people, especially black men, and I'm so honored to see all these black men giving me comments and all that, because I want to change the world and how we view mental health and mental health therapy. And when I leave this world, I want to be able to pass on a legacy of hope, pass on a legacy of healing, and definitely pass on a legacy of just being able to celebrate who we are in this time. So that's what I'm thinking.
I absolutely love that. I love that. I love everything about it, Marty. Black male therapist, we out there.
That's right. That's my boy
I love
Sharon.
it. I love it, Marty. I absolutely love the podcast. And even when we were putting it
Thank
out,
you.
I believed in the podcast and all that it was going to be able to do. So, Marty, we have a couple of people on,
Yes.
and I want to make sure we bring them on. So, you guys, if you guys are out there, I want you guys to make sure if you have not listened to Mental Health Matters with Marty, if you are not subscribed, listen, now is the time that after this, because we don't want you to leave here. But
Right.
guess what? If you have another iPad or another iPhone, because a lot of y'all do, make sure that you go and subscribe. Go subscribe to Mental Health Matters
Yes.
with Marty. Go subscribe to the podcast. Listen, this is literally free therapy. So the thing about podcasts is that there is so much content going out. And what you don't get in live shows, you can get in
Right.
podcasts. You can do it on the go. You get more details within podcast. And so make sure that you go. And not only do you go and subscribe, but I want you to go and I want you to give him a 5-star rating and a review. Listen, this is why it's so important. We're going to talk about this later. We're going to talk about
Yes.
statistics surrounding Black podcasters and Black
Mm-hmm.
listeners and what that looks like. And so it's important that you leave these ratings, that you leave this review, because this is almost like Yelp. So somebody that doesn't know Marty, but it's like, I need to listen to a mental health podcast. And you know what? This guy's Black. I want to listen to him. It is your review that pushes
Mm-hmm.
people over to say, okay, I'm going to give this a chance. So I want you guys to go do that. I want you guys to show Marty love. I love this. Just all the comments coming in. I'm telling
Yes.
you,
Thank you,
amazing,
Sharma.
amazing, amazing. So we're going to bring on someone that you just talked about, and
Yes.
he has an amazing podcast as well. So we're going to speak to him for a couple of minutes. I want to bring on Bobby at the B-Side Podcast.
What's happening, everybody? How y'all doing? How's it
What's
going?
up, Bob? How you
Hey,
feeling?
hey, man, I'm maintaining. You know what I'm saying? It's a little technical difficulties, but I'm here. I'm here. You know. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
My computer act like it never done a podcast before. But I'm
Right.
here. I'm here.
Right.
How's everybody, man? Hey, yo, man. And before I let off, congratulations, first year anniversary.
Thank
Bobby,
you so much.
thank you so much for coming on. So we are excited. Listen, Bobby, you got to tell everybody. I know I said it, but I want you to say it. Introduce the B-Side podcast.
That's right. Give us a little bit more volume on your mic because you're a little low.
Okay, is that a little better?
That's
Yes.
better.
Okay, no doubt, no doubt. The B-Side podcast, basically, I'm just bringing you barbershop talk into your living room. The main thing I got with it, basically how I want to introduce myself, I'm a hip-hop head, R&B, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And my take is, I obviously had to be my initials, but the B-side of a record, sometimes that was the best stuff. Sometimes that was the realest music. So that's the whole thing I want to bring, basically, like I said. I know a whole lot of funny cats, man. They might not be out there in the public eye. They might not be any CEOs running any companies, anything like that.
Right.
But these are normal dudes who, basically, I want to say is we have voices too.
Yes.
All facets of our community. And I'm just trying to provide a voice for, my interests, sports, hip hop, a little, BS talking on the side, having some funs and laughs, some couple drinks, I won't take it there. Sometimes you got to roll out the spliffs, get your mind right. And that's what we do. We're gonna give you some raw action conversation that's on our minds and within our community. So that's what the
I
B-Side
love
podcast
that.
is
I
about.
love that, Bobby. So it is like barbershop talk. So
Right.
so I get it. Listen, I get it. My husband goes to the barbershop. My son goes to the barbershop. I'm like, I'm dropping you off.
Yes.
I'm going to head out because
Yes.
it's not my space.
Yes.
And that's okay. I think that is okay, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not my space. Now, I may go over to the B-side and just hear a little bit and be like, let me see what they talking about. Because I didn't even know what's going on in the barbershop.
We'll take that.
But I love it. So, Bobby, I do want to ask you, I'm going to ask you essentially the same question I asked Marty, is that when you were thinking about creating this podcast,
Right.
what is the one person? Because I think sometimes, like Marty's podcast is mental health, right? And so sometimes it gets deep and it's emotional. And so it's this.
Yeah.
But there is still an impact that you are making
Yes.
in the community, and a space, a safe space for men to come and to listen to your podcast and to
Exactly.
feel like they have a brotherhood. And so when you think about your podcast, who is like that one person that you were thinking about when you were thinking about creating this podcast?
Basically, I was following some people, I would want to say they were, how can I say, they were speakers, as far as, I can't think of the right word right now, inspirational speakers maybe.
Right.
I was listening to a couple of their podcasts and, matter of fact, I want to say is E.T. Thomas, I want to say was the original one. And also that led me to Gary Vaynerchuk. And with those guys, they just was basically like, yo, just do it. Just do something. Whatever you want to get into, just do it. Don't worry about what people think or even sometimes whatever you think. Sometimes your own thinking gets in the way of where you need to be.
There we go.
And so basically they was just like, I was just listening off them and just like, hey, why not? Let's just see what happens. And I learn as I go. And, because like I said, we don't have any voices really out there. We need more of our voices out there.
That part.
Right.
We're in the information age right now. We need to share and learn.
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about right now. And any information or experiences that I've been through or somebody could learn or pick up on and vice versa, I'm with it. So basically, my inspiration came from other podcasters, to be honest.
I love it. But I think it's so important because your mission is the same, right? It came from them to get you to start, but then you started and now you're inspiring and impacting others to say, listen, just like you said, just start, do something. We need our voice out there. We need that voice out there. I love it because as a Black community, we are not a monolith, right? And so
Right.
you have all of these different ideas and brilliance and just excellence within our community. And so you can go to Marty and you can get some mental health. You can come to me and get some inspiration and storytelling.
Right.
We can go to the B-side and get some barbershop
B-side.
talk and feel like, you know what I mean? And feel like we're at, the barbecue,
Right.
And so, Bobby, I love what you're bringing. I love your podcast and just the idea surrounding your podcast. And so, you guys, I'm going to say this to every single person. So listen,
Yes.
I need you guys to make sure that you subscribe to at the B-Side Podcast. All right.
There you
The
go.
B-Side Podcast.
There you
If
go.
you are, and I'm assuming, Bobby, that it's on Apple and
It's on,
Spotify and all of the
yes,
places. So
yes.
wherever you
All the
listen to
platforms.
podcasts, you can do that, and make sure that you rate and review. It is so important. We're going to talk about the importance of that really, really soon, because I know you keep hearing me say that. And there's a reason why I am saying that, is because it's very important. When we talk about the numbers, you'll know that. So Bobby, thank you so much. We're going to talk more. We're going to just bring in someone else. Marty, did you have something?
No, I'm
Oh,
gonna
okay.
say, I'm saying, stay on, don't hang
Yes,
up. You stay on.
don't leave.
But you know what? I'm so
Right
grateful
on.
that that I get to glean from my younger brother. I was gonna say little, but Bobby's taller than me, and I don't know how that happened. But to be, hey,
Hey, you know what?
I
Hold
said,
on, real quick.
Right.
I
What?
take that back. On the inspiration, I ain't going to front. I went to my brother's office, seen his office. I was like, oh, okay. You know, sometimes you got to actually be in it. And he had this one area in his office, and I said to myself, like, yo, bro, you need to do a podcast. Remember that? I said, yo, this
Yeah.
spot is ideal.
right.
Boom. So my brother too was my inspiration. All right,
I
that's
love it.
Listen,
I love it.
I
Love it.
appreciate
Love
you,
it.
Bobby.
I love it. So we are going to bring up. So one of the things that I am so proud about is that Marty has not only taken his podcast, but what he has now done is he has now poured into other people to build their podcast. And so the next people that we are going to bring up is Steve and Michelle, and they are starting a podcast. We're going to hear about their podcast. Hey guys.
Oh shit! I mean, what's happening? What up, Steve?
So listen, Steve and Michelle, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. What is the name of your podcast?
Ivy Bound LA.
Okay, Ivy Bound LA. I need to hear more about it. Listen, you better
Look.
come on. Yes.
Yeah, so you can go first and then I'll add in.
But wait, before we go, that picture right there says about $150,000 a year. But go ahead.
Right? Yeah.
Well, the reason for us starting this was, we have, as you just saw a picture there a second ago, that's our twin boys, and two of our pride and joy. We have three boys all together, and they're all our hearts. So
Yes.
one of the things as parents, we want the best. We want them to win, and we want them to win big. You know what I mean? So what we did was, and in the podcast, we talk about how we parented them from birth to the Ivy Leagues, and it was a journey, and it was not just us making this thing happen. It was a family journey. You know what I mean? So we incorporating our closest family friends and our family itself, and our grandma, grandpas, and all the things we've done, and we're putting it in a systematic approach to how we parented them to the Ivy League, and they're two black boys.
That's
making it to the Ivy League, and we wanted to give other children of color something to see and it's tangible that you can do it too, no matter what your background is, no matter what happens.
Right.
We talk about those things in our podcast about how you can make some adjustments, some tweaks here and there, and some sacrifice, and that's for the parents. You know what I mean? So we didn't do, let's get a little stealer here. We didn't do a lot of vacations because we had a goal for them. We wanted them to be, because we couldn't afford all the stuff we've done if we were going on vacations. So we took that as an avenue to pour into our kids, and one of the things that is important to us is our kids. And people talk about how important their kids are. We just happen to like our kids.
Right. That's so good. So I'm going to assume that the podcast is co-hosted. So will all the episodes be you two, or some episodes would be one or the other? What does that look like?
It's both of us, because my background's in education and science. So my
background is knuckles.
But I talk from an education perspective of what I did and my contribution, and then Steve talks about definitely his background and how that contributed to them. So it's both of us, but we also will have guests in our podcast as well. But to add to what Steve said is just we're giving everyone a blueprint that we received and passing on, because that's not given to us, especially as people of color. We don't even think that's a possibility. And we're not wealthy people, and so people assume that we were, you sent them to an Ivy League, they went to a private school on a shoestring budget. That's how we did it. But so we want to let people of color know that that's possible and how they can do it. I mean, we sent them through private school from K through 12. How did we do that? So that's kind of, and we start from like 0 to 12th grade, and the college acceptance process and everything that we did. So
I love that.
And we will bring guests in to talk about, different things that happen throughout the time. We will be interviewing Mr. Marty himself, and being that he's the mental health expert in our lives, how kids in certain age groups and that kind of thing actually, there's issues that goes on with them mentally at certain age groups, different levels in their walk through life.
And Marty, we want to say congratulations, and
Miles
and Isaiah would not be where they are without you and Vendon and Brent constantly pouring into Steve and uplifting him, and to allow him to be the man that he was to Miles and Isaiah, to help them along the way. So I just want to thank you.
Well, listen, it wasn't easy because, Steve would fight us, and we got to fight a couple times. We got to pull him in the back alley.
I love that. You guys said something that's so important, and this really reverberates around everything that we do. And you said exposure, because exposure allows us to know that it's possible, and that's all we need. We just need to see one picture. We just need to see somebody that has done it, right? To allow us to know that it's possible. And so it is that exposure. And the reason why podcasts are so important is because it gives you exposure. You see, you hear different things that people are doing in their lives and the lives of the people that they may bring on. So I'm telling you, I cannot wait to hear that podcast. And I think it's not just the Ivy League, but it's also just hearing how you parent intentionally, right? So it just goes beyond just the Ivy League, but the fact that you guys were parenting intentionally, and that's so very important.
But you know what I also love, Portia, is
the mindset.
And the continuing of that, because Bobby went to college on an athletic scholarship, and then even interviewing him will be great, because now you have another set of regulations that you have to hit and everything, and what that entails, and being a person of color on so many different levels, being an athlete and how you're viewed and what they're I'm talking for you, Bobby, but tell us, Stephen, just
I'm
but go ahead and jump.
I'm loving why I make you stop. I'm not going
to. But he and I have spoken about that. See, because my college experience was totally different than his college experience, and how do we navigate that? And we were both really, I say it this way, quasi first generation. Our Uncle Lee had his PhD and all that, but there was such a difference in age, and he didn't live near us. And this was before cell phones, y'all. When you say,
you are old.
Bobby, go ahead and talk.
That's not a die.
That is so funny. So you guys, listen. This is what I want to come back to the conversation.
Let's come back to that.
I want to give Bobby an opportunity to talk and everybody to talk, but I want to make sure that I bring up another person who is starting her podcast. Actually, Steve and Michelle. When is the podcast launching? Is it this summer?
Like next month.
Next month. Yes. Absolutely. Excellent.
June 1st.
So the podcast is launching June 1st. You all make sure you guys know how I do. Alexa, set an alarm for June 1st for the Ivy Bounds LA podcast. Hello, somebody.
Yes.
Last time I did that, somebody's Alexa actually answered. So listen, you never know. You never know. She's always listening. But the next person that I want to bring on, she is an amazing woman. I love her. I cannot wait to hear her podcast. It is MarQuerita. MarQuerita Story.
Dr. Story.
Hey, happy anniversary to you.
Hey,
Thank
Dr.
you, darling.
Story, how are you?
I am absolutely fabulous. Good to see you, Miss Portia. You look amazing. And to the barbershop guy,
Marguerite, that's my brother.
love it.
I love it. I love it. So, MarQuerita, listen, with all this, you better listen. All right.
That's
See,
the
y'all, I
start.
was being good. Y'all know she got on this red. You better come on, darling. Hello,
Yes.
darling. You better come on and give it to us on this here Tuesday evening as we talk about your podcast. Yes.
Yes.
I'm excited. I'm in that crew with the Ivy bound individuals as well, where Marty has reached back. He had to come back and get me, but I'm so grateful.
Yes.
For that, and to be in the lineup of what's going to be happening in June as well. But I just honor the man of God, the person that Marty is. I just love and appreciate him. And I pray that this is one of so many anniversaries that I get to witness and just celebrate this amazing man of God.
Yes. I love it.
Well,
So,
thank you.
MarQuerita,
Yes.
what is the name of your podcast?
Mine is the Cinderella Syndrome.
You better come on. Okay. I love it. The
Yes.
daughter's dialogue, the Cinderella syndrome.
Yes.
So, talk to me a little bit about what made you start this podcast.
Well, one of the things I was talking to Marty, and Marty up and some stuff with some ideas, but I was sharing with him about me having a love for being a daddy's girl, and he has a sweet baby girl as well. And I was sharing with him how the story of Cinderella was this a precious story for me, and it was the Walt Disney version and not the newer versions that have come out. But that book was one that was precious to me. But it also was one that was an eye-opening thing for me as a little girl. I knew I would never be a Cinderella, and I would never be chosen because of my ethnicity, because of the way I looked, because of where I lived. And it was something that as I grew, it just began to see threads of things through my life that were so similar with women sometimes attacking other women just because of who they were and not because of what they had done, and not having an understanding of your own self-worth without society deeming that you had value because your foot fit in a shoe. And so it was that I looked at. And because of being in ministry as well, I saw that the syndrome was not just in the book that I read, but that the syndrome was also found in scripture. So I want to kind of look at some of those things and have an opportunity to kind of discuss it in our contemporary context and to maybe discover that maybe we don't need to fit a shoe. But maybe we can discover that there's something incredible about us, and the world might just be waiting on us to just step out on the scene.
Hello, darling. Come
Isn't
on.
that good?
Listen, you don't have to fit in a shoe. You do not have to fit in a shoe. I'm telling you, listen, I tell them I was not made for a box, honey. Listen, I'm too big for any boxes. So I am too big for those slippers. Listen, I love it, MarQuerita. So listen, I know you have at least one episode written down that you're going to do. Let us know what is one episode that we can look forward
You're not ready.
to.
You're not ready because I wasn't ready.
I have several of them, but the first one is the syndrome, the Cinderella syndrome, because you've got to be properly diagnosed. And so we look at some of the symptoms that would lead to a proper diagnosis of the syndrome. And some of the symptoms of the syndrome is having struggles with other sisters. choices that may lead to potentially having the syndrome. And there are a lot of times women will suggest that they don't work well with other women. You could have the syndrome. And so that's all.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Give him a sneak peek.
Did she give you a little? Listen,
just
Bobby's
a little
like,
bit, just a little bit. So listen,
Preach to 'em.
MarQuerita is coming out. Her
Hallelujah.
episode is coming out in June as well. So we want to make sure that we are marking our calendars and that
Yes.
we are supporting and that we are subscribing to these podcasts. And if there are podcasts that you enjoy, if you enjoy the voice, if you enjoy the storytelling, the people they bring on, if it speaks to you, make sure that you share. It is so very, very vital that you share.
Yes.
So the statistics are very, very clear. So right before we went into quarantine, it was about 1.75 million podcasts that were out in the world. And now we're looking at about 2.3 million podcasts just in that limited time. So, but this is the kicker, because in all of those podcasts that are out, the listenership for Blacks is 13% of that. Black listeners are 13%. And when you think about creators are around that 11 to 13% too of Black podcasters. Now, the one thing we can celebrate is that from 2010 to 2020, that number has 5x'd. So that means
That's
that Black people are listening,
coming around,
and Black people are actually creating these podcasts. And so when we look at just the history of podcasting, it was very, very expensive. When you look at 2010, it was very, very expensive. You couldn't just turn your phone on. You had to buy your servers, own your servers. You had to upload and do all of these things. Now it literally is. You can go on your phone and it's super easy to do. But while we think about those statistics, I think when we think about us only making up 15%, one of those things, Steve, you would be interested in knowing is one, because when we look at Black people in technology as a whole, we are usually not first adopters, right? So that is one thing, is the technology behind it. I know somebody on here said, how do I get to podcasts? I'm gonna let you know, girl, listen, all you have to do is go to your app store. If you are on Apple, go to your app store. If you are on an Android, go to, I think it's Google Play. I don't have an Android, so I'm sorry, but go to Google Play. You can you can download Spotify, you can download Stitcher, you can download iHeartRadio, Pandora, and podcasts are there. So you can listen to it there because somebody said that. But while we're thinking about those statistics and while we're thinking about how we want to bring this awareness of Black podcasters and Black listeners to the forefront, I think it's very important to kind of ask the question, why is it so important for us to have our voices out there? Bobby, I'm actually going to go to you and kind of ask that question. Why is it important for us to have our voices out there in this medium?
No doubt. We have to hear our voices, because technically, I mean, you gave the numbers. We don't have a whole lot of voices out there. I think, honestly, I'm going to be straight up. A lot of times we've been misled. We've been led astray. So why not? I think this is a good time where we can focus on what we need to do as a group of people, and communicate and give stories within our own tribes and see where that leads us. We got nothing else to lose.
Right.
Absolutely. It's the stories, right? So Marty, why is it so important for us to have our voices out there?
We have to show the complexity of who we are as a people. And we are more than just rappers. We are more than just athletes. We are more than just thugs, if you will. We are more than just. We are so complex. We are so diverse. We are so different. We are so rich. And it's very important that we show all the sides of who we are as a people, all the strengths of who we are as a people, all the knowledge of who we are as a people, all the facets of who we are as a people. And I'm going to say, I had this conversation last night that we don't have enough people stepping up to the plate these days. And we need to know and get that whole self-confidence and that self-love back in in us as a people, because there's too much self-hatred going on. We look in the mirror, and I love what Dr. Story is saying, the Cinderella syndrome. I think we have the Prince Charming chant or charming syndrome as well, because we don't love who we are, and we don't think of ourselves as kings and princes and warriors in that regard. So to help change the narrative of what we think, feel, and believe about ourselves.
I love that. So, when we think back, because we are talking about the Black community and Black creatives and Black content creators, when we think back, there is a word griot, and it was originated from West Africa, and they were storytellers, and these were the people of the story. So when you needed a story, they would tell the stories, almost historians, right?
Yes.
And so I think when we think about podcasting and we really sit in it, and not just about, oh, we're just doing something because this is good. But when we think of ourselves as modern day griots, we're telling the stories, right? So when Steve and Michelle, and they tell this story of how they sent 3 sons to an Ivy League college,
Yes.
they are the storytellers. And
Yes.
so as we think about podcasting, and we think about the fact that we're not just bringing people on, we're not just hanging out, having barbershop talk, but these are messages, these are stories, and they belong to us. They belong to us. So these are stories that we can pass down. I'm going to ask Michelle and Steve, as thinking about being the griots, the storytellers for our community, on how can we parent intentionally to send our kids to Ivy League, or to send them to private school, or to do this. What is that story that you want people to take away from as they listen to your podcast?
For us, we wanted people to understand that we listened, and we listened to storytellers, and that's how we got the blueprint to guide our sons. And we listened to the collective different people to give us the ideas of what we were supposed to do, because we didn't have a clue. No one knows how to parent and the mindset. So when Portia, you said storytellers, that's what we did. We were listeners to the storytellers that told us exactly what to do. Checked our egos and said, we don't know what we're doing, and it's okay not to know. And just be transparent with people when they said, oh, so you know about this? No, we don't know about that, because no one tells us, and it wasn't passed on. So we became listeners, and now we're becoming the storytellers.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I built a career in IT by finding the smartest person in the room, jumping in their back pocket, shutting my mouth, listen, and applying. So we've always maintained that mentality, as Michelle just mentioned, and with that, we always talk about sacrifice, and you also got, as a man, I'm proud, and I'm a proud Black man here in America, where we're all met with opposition in all angles, because they're expecting us to fail. And you hear the stories from people talk about, you got to be better than. Dot, dot, dot. You know what I mean? So we've always heard those things and that thing. So we actually applied that as well to our parenting skills, our styles. But the big thing is we were coachable, and finding that coach was willing to share, even when they didn't know they were sharing. You feel me? Because sometimes they don't want to give you the secret, but a lot of times, if you're quiet enough, it'll come out. And then when you hear it, bank it, and then apply it. So that's kind of the origin of how we've done that, and that's what we're willing to share with anyone that's willing to listen. And it's not because we just have kids; it's for parents of people who want to have kids.
Yes.
And we started at 4th grade, because that's when we heard the blueprint. I wish we had it at birth.
I love it. That's the thing about storytelling, is that it allows us to I have this moment. I always say that stories highlight our humanity. It highlights our humanity. And so often, as just the Black community, but as storytellers, as listeners, our humanity is always questioned. And so what if we can tell stories that people can listen, that our kids go to Ivy Leagues, that this is what our
Yes.
sons and our husbands and our uncles and our brothers do in the barbershop, that they are human too. And so
Yes.
maybe someone will listen to a podcast episode and say, wait a minute, that's humanity there.
Yes.
So as we
You
talk
know what?
about stories highlighting our humanity, MarQuerita, I want to ask, what do you want to highlight in your podcast?
I think I'm just honored to lend my voice to the voices that are beginning to emerge in this season. Because one of the things that I did not hear or see as a girl were people that look like me, or hear the stories of those that look like me. And so I want to ensure that I don't have children. And so the only legacy I can leave is either my voice or the work that I've done. And so I believe it's an imperative for me to be able to show another little girl whose voice may be heavy and who learned how to whisper in a helicopter that you can.
I love it.
You,
Yes.
you have something to say.
Yeah.
And I know how to make my voice soft and engaging like yours. When I come in, it's like,
No.
she talking so loud.
Yes. So girl, I had to work on it. Listen. I'm being real good today. But and the funny thing about our voices, because I want to say this, I hated my voice. So before I've been a storyteller and didn't even know it. But whenever I would minister or whenever I would speak, I would never, ever listen to my voice. The podcast made me comfortable with my
Yes.
raspy voice, where sometimes it's getting caught in my throat. The podcast made me comfortable with being able to hear my voice. And so I think it's important that when we're thinking about listening to podcasters, when we're supporting podcasters, that is somebody's story. Whether or not their podcast is comedy or music or whatever it is, that is somebody's story. And so the thing about podcasting and why we need to hear us is because we need to hear a new sound. So podcasting has always been very, very white male, right? And so you have that white male voice. And so whenever a woman would come in, that voice is too squeaky. Nobody will listen to you on the radio or listen to you on the podcast. But I am here to tell you that people will listen. People will listen, and we have to
Yes.
make them listen, because we have to let them hear the ranges of our voice, the baritones and the sopranos. They have to
Right.
hear that. And so we get the opportunity to take them on a journey of not just our story, but what our voices actually sound like. One of the things when I was doing, I do a lot of research as it pertains to podcast, and Nielsen did a research. So while we are just 13% of listeners, about 56% of Black and Hispanic listeners that were surveyed said that they purchased something from a podcast that they listened to. I know you're thinking, what does that
Wow.
mean? That means that
Yeah.
as a collective,
Yes.
we have power to monetize on
Yes.
our podcast, to make money from our podcast. That is what large podcasts are doing. And so
Yes.
while a lot of independent indie podcasters, as we like to say, we don't always have the numbers of these large networks. And so that's why it's important that you have this collaborative effect, right? So whether or not we're under Portia Scott or Martinez Sellers, or we can come together and say, well, you
That's
know
right.
what? We're going to go to this particular sponsor as a network, because that's what we
Yes.
do. But we don't know that, right? And so
Right.
that's why it's so important. If we have these numbers, if we have these statistics, this is why, my friends, it's important that you celebrate and that you support these podcasts, because there is nowhere in Apple where I can go and I can say Black Mental Health Podcast. I have to hope that the podcast that
Right.
they show me will be somebody Black. And then I have to scroll and scroll and scroll. That's why when you're thinking, well, why do they need all these numbers? That's why. Because we need to make sure that those Black podcasts, that those Black podcasters are going to the front, so that when you open Apple and they have the new and noteworthy, that's important, because now you can say there are Black podcasters. But if I've never listened to a podcast before and I go to Apple, guess what? I am likely going to see a sea of whiteness. And that is not being, I'm not trying to be, funny or anything like that, but it's just because it's just the numbers, right? It's just the probability. If we only make up 13%, the probability of you seeing a Black podcaster when you go on is very low, unless they're with a large network. So this is why it's so important to support indie podcasters. I'm telling you, go out, support, subscribe, rate, review. I will tell you this. I listen to podcasts all the time. Some of them I don't continue to listen to because it's not for me, but that's fine. But let me tell you what I do. And this is what I want you guys to do. I want you to listen to an episode. I want you to rate that podcast, give them 5 stars, and give them a review. Because if we don't collectively do it for our community, who's going to do it for us? And then guess what? The barbershop may not be for me, but you know what? I'm gonna be like, listen, honey, you should send this to my brothers and my husband and the guys that I know. Maybe I don't have children, but there's somebody that I can say, oh, Ivy League, LA bound. That's LA bound, LA. That's, you need to listen to that. Mental health. Yes. And so I think collectively, I want to, Marty, and you can really speak to this, is how is it one way that we can support one another, come together collectively with our audiences, and make this happen so that people do listen and people do know that we are out there.
I think one of the things that, Portia, you and I always talk about is that we get on each other's podcasts and we share it as well, because now we're networking. And we have to stop the jealousy in that. Listen, I'm excited about your podcast. You're on Voya podcast, and she's done that. So, speak to that even. Now Portia's hosting for major Fortune 500 companies. I'm trying to be up like that. I'm trying to be a TED Talk. And I love it because Portia also speaks and she says, listen, Essence, I need you to have, I'm going to be hosting. I'm going to be going to the Essence Fest. And that, I'm excited about Steve and Michelle's podcast. I'm excited about the B-Sides podcast. I'm excited about the Cinderella Syndrome. I'm excited about Vindon, as he's going to be bringing his podcast, and so many others out there. And we have to learn to support each other and networking with each other, and making sure as we're sending a shout out and continue doing various things just like this, so that we expose our people to what other great podcasts are. I'm so in agreement with you. We may not have, it may not hit all the buttons that we have to, but let's support. Let's help to populate and those things within each other, because when one goes up, we all go up, and that's what it's about.
That's right.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. You guys, this has been so good. I cannot believe we are at the end of the episode. But what I do want to do, Dara, is I want to cut in to Bobby, to the Dolphins, to MarQuerita, so you guys can tell your podcast, the name and all of that stuff before we leave, so that we can support. Right now, it looks like it's about 31 people on. Listen, if you go subscribe, if you listen to one episode, because listening does matter as well. It's very important that you listen. That's how the numbers, the analytics, let me tell you something about that data that they have. And so listen, one of the things we say is, when you start a podcast, be expected to produce 100 podcasts and nobody show up. And when we talk about nobody showing up, and so when we are out here producing these podcasts and doing the work, then we want people to know. So we do have another podcaster on here, John Henry Scott III, and his podcast is called Chart to Heart. It's called Chart to Heart, and it is a business podcast, but it is going from the chart of business, and putting it in your heart, and kind of merging people and culture. So I will let Bobby go in and just tell the name of your podcast, and how can we keep in touch with you.
No doubt. Name of my podcast is the B-Side Podcast. You can go to my site, thebsidepodcast.com. You can go to IG, the B-Side Podcast Q. You can hit us up on Twitter, the B-Side Podcast, the number 2. And also, basically, like I said, bringing you barbershop talk to your living room. You know, hey, it might not be for everybody, but it's for us, and that's all that matters. So definitely, those are my handles. You can check me out at, go to my merchandise store as far as AlecRoberts.com, Alec Roberts on IG, and also one more thing, you can check out my YouTube page, Bobby Sellers, and all my podcasts will be downloaded up there.
I love it. Thank you so much, Bobby. You know what? It looks like Bobby has a couple of ratings. Listen, we need to get him to 10. So right now, I want to make sure that when we leave, that you guys head over there, that you subscribe. I just subscribed, Bobby. I'm going to listen, but I want you guys to make sure that you rate, give him a review. Let's get those numbers up for him since you've been on here. Thank you so much, Bobby. Let us go to Michelle and Steve. Tell us one more time what the podcast is and how can we keep in touch with you?
Well, the podcast name is IV Bound LA, spelled the same way, IV Bound LA. You can find it on all social media platforms. Same name, IV Bound LA, for Twitter, Instagram, even in YouTube. So go to IV Bound LA, subscribe. You'll see the countdown beginning to hit us for the launch date. You can reach us there. DM me. I'm always online.
Yes, you are.
If you say you can't reach me, that's not true. So we're here. One real quick caveat: Michelle's academic, super brainiac, that kind of thing. I'm just a regular guy. I'm surrounded here on this forum right now with a bunch of intellectual capital that's amazing to me. So one of the other things we wanted to launch our podcast and let us know that people know that you can be a regular guy, because regular people have children too, but want the best for their children. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that we bring. That's the dynamics we bring to our podcast and our show, to let people know that you can be normal and raise some Ivy League kids.
Are you trying to say the rest of us aren't normal?
I love it. I love it.
but you know what? Check out for them Dolphin twins. Y'all gonna need a neurosurgeon and all these other things. They are brilliant young men. And listen, Steve did a whole thing when they walked on Brown campus, #Dolphin twins. And even the president was like, who are you? #Dolphin twins. I know you. But I love that whole marketing. He's crazy, but he's good.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I just subscribed to the Instagram account. So MarQuerita, tell us the name of your podcast and how can we keep in touch with you?
Well, my podcast is A Daughter's Dialogue. We're starting out with this Cinderella syndrome, and I'm with Marcel. And so everything is going to be coming out through them. And I'm so honored to be a part of what he's doing. I'm on YouTube and Instagram at MarQuerita Story. And I'm grateful for the Ivy League group, because I may not have kids, but I got nieces and nephews and godchildren, and they always asking for money. So I'm going to be listening and telling their parents who they need to be listening to, because y'all going to come up out my pocket.
I love it. 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 You guys, this has been an amazing, amazing show. Thank you all so much for coming on.
Portia,
Thank
we cannot let you go without sharing all the many podcasts and everything that you do. Come on now. It's about sharing.
It is. It's about sharing. Hello, darling. My name is Portia, and I am the host of the Wake Up and Show Up podcast. I am also the host of Voya's podcast, Continuing the Conversation, as well as A Different Lens and Another Filter. So that's 3 podcasts, Wake Up and Show Up. And what we're doing here is we're making an impact one story at a time. So we tell stories and share stories of mission-driven individuals that are impacting humanity. And then again, I have a podcast with Voya where I host small business owners. It's an incredible podcast. You can go to Continuing the Conversation, Voya podcast, and you can listen there. And then I do a really fun podcast with The Love of My Life, A Different Lens and Another Filter. As you can see, I love telling stories. So thank you, Marty, so very much for having me on. I am so excited. Happy anniversary. And the last thing that I just wanted to say is that I take people through this Launch in 30 Days podcast course where you can listen. You can go on YouTube and you can find a lot. But let me tell you, when you have step-by-step instructions, you're able to go from idea to launch very quickly. And so if you are interested, you can go to my bio. There's a link tree, and right at the top, let's schedule a consultation to talk about your podcast and your podcast ideas.
Yes.
Maybe one day you'll have us on your show, Portia.
Actually, I was literally thinking.
I'm just saying.
No. Honestly, I was thinking. I was like, I need to have them on the show. So, but we are a professional podcast, so I will send you an email.
And a meeting request. Marty.
This is how we roll. This is how we roll.
Just in the text. You down?
Listen. Listen, I'm using her. Hey,
listen, y'all, and let me tell you, please respond, Michelle, because I'm not going to say, but there's a certain person on this podcast that I've literally sent a whole email to and a follow-up email as if he was one of the guests that I didn't know. Let me tell you, did they respond? Nope. That's all right.
What?
Well,
I thought it was me, and when you
can't be me.
I was like, oh.
Marty choking over there.
What had happened was, listen,
he goes me too.
Well, I don't feel bad because y'all have been friends way longer than us.
I go Steve on purpose unless Michelle says call him. So.
And I'm the bad guy.
Hey. But this is what it's all about. And I'm so grateful to all of you thank you for showing up and just, I called my brother yesterday and be like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, you're going to be on the show tomorrow. So I said, I've been advertising and blasting you. But I love my family, and you all are family here, and this is what we are. And I can't do what I do without all of your support. So listen, everyone, please like and share this. We need your support because we want to make an impact and difference in the world. So as always, I want to thank you for coming to my celebration of my 1 year of Mental Health Matters with Marty podcast. This has been a great journey, and expect some new and exciting things to come out as we continue this journey to your mental health and wellness. And please join us tomorrow night. We're having part 2 with House Calls with Dr. Allen, as we're going to be discussing the difference between CBD and TCH. What is I done messed it all up. TCH, yes. With that THC, that's it. Lord have mercy, acronyms. But we are so glad that you have this. Listen, there's so many webinars and things out there, but please check out my website at mentalhealthmarty.com for your mental health paraphernalia, your shirts, your t-shirts, and everything else you need with that. And again, we've already mentioned the podcast. If you have not listened to an episode, please do, and become a part of the I Matter family by texting I Matter to 855-717-1272. As Portia's been saying all night, leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review, because we want other people to come on board and do this as well. And some of the other ones we're going to be launching here soon. We talked about Vyndon Smith. My cousin Nikki Jones Brooks is on here, and we're going to be doing something. It is called No Frown Zone. We're talking about Down syndrome and parenting children with Down syndrome in the African American community. As always, we say, listen, you don't have to continue to secretly suffer in silence in the shadow of shame, but we want you to stop the stinking thinking that's pertaining to mental health and wellness. As we say each week, we want you to speak up, we want you to speak out, but more importantly, we want you to live as you continue to enjoy your life. See you tomorrow. Enjoy your life.